Marie Thompson had always believed in the strength of her marriage. After 35 years together, she and Richard had built what she thought was an unshakable foundation. One crafted from years of laughter, shared burdens, and memories stitched together through the passage of time. They had raised 3 children, weathered financial struggles, celebrated milestones, and leaned on each other through life's inevitable storms. But it took only one seemingly insignificant moment to shatter the illusion she had lived in for over 3 decades. It began with an envelope. That morning, Marie had been sorting through the mail like she always did. The pile contained the usual: a couple of bills, an advertisement for a furniture sale, a credit card offer. But tucked in between was something that didn't belong. A pale yellow envelope with no return address. It wasn't addressed to her. It wasn't even addressed to Richard. Instead, it bore the name of their next-door neighbor, Linda Cartwright. Marie felt a prickle of unease. Linda had lived next door for as long as Marie could remember. She was a quiet, unassuming woman, a widow whose husband had passed away over a decade ago. They weren't exactly close, but they had a cordial, neighborly relationship. There was no reason Richard should have a letter intended for Linda. Marie was about to set it aside, thinking she would drop it off at Linda's later, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the way Richard had shuffled through the mail that morning, his fingers lingering on the envelope before he quickly shoved it under the others. Maybe it was the tension in his shoulders when she entered the room, or the way he avoided her gaze as he grabbed his keys and left for work in a hurry. Curiosity flickered, then grew into something heavier, something she wasn't ready to name. Marie wasn't the type to invade privacy. She believed in trust, in honesty. But this letter, it felt like a crack in the foundation of her marriage, one she hadn't noticed until now. With trembling fingers, she opened it. The words inside knocked the air from her lungs. "My love, I miss you more than words can say. Every stolen moment we share keeps me going. 35 years, and I still love you as much as I did the first day we met. I wish things were different, but for now, we must be careful. Yours always, L." Marie's heart pounded. Her vision blurred as she read and reread the words, hoping she had misunderstood. 35 years? That was the length of her marriage, the length of her entire life with Richard. Her mind scrambled for explanations. Was this some kind of mistake? A coincidence? But the moment she thought of Richard's reaction to the mail that morning, reality crashed down like a tidal wave. It was real. Her husband, the man she had trusted, loved, and built a life with, had been having an affair. Not for a few months. Not for a few years. For their entire marriage. And the woman he had been in love with all this time had been living right next door. Marie sat at the kitchen table, the letter trembling in her hands. A whirlwind of emotions stormed through her: anger, disbelief, humiliation. How could she have been so blind? How could she have spent decades believing in a lie? She thought back to the early years of their marriage. Richard had always been attentive, a devoted husband and father. But now, as she sifted through her memories with the cold lens of hindsight, small moments of doubt crept in. Has he ever truly been hers? Marie needed answers. She refused to sit in the dark, drowning in unanswered questions. And so, for the first time in their 35 years together, she started watching Richard with fresh eyes. That evening, when he returned home, she forced herself to act normal. She smiled, served dinner, and made small talk. But underneath, she was hyper-aware of every move he made. The way he checked his phone when he thought she wasn't looking. The way he seemed distracted, his mind elsewhere. At night, after Richard had fallen asleep, Marie lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She had to be sure. She needed undeniable proof before she confronted him. Over the next few days, she paid closer attention than ever before. Every late-night work call, every sudden trip to the grocery store, every lingering glance toward Linda's house. It all stood out in stark contrast now. She couldn't believe she had never noticed it before. And then, the final confirmation came. One evening, after dinner, Richard stood up and stretched. "I think I'll go for a walk. Clear my head," he said casually, the way he always did. Marie's stomach churned. She forced herself to nod. "Okay, don't be too long." As soon as the door shut behind him, she grabbed her coat and followed. The night air was cool, crisp. She stayed a safe distance behind, her heart pounding. Richard walked with purpose. Not toward the street, not toward the park, but toward the house next door. He knocked once. The door opened almost immediately, as if Linda had been waiting. And then, without hesitation, he stepped inside. Marie felt like the ground had been ripped out from beneath her. Her husband wasn't just having an affair. He was living a double life. And she had been nothing more than the woman he came home to at the end of the day. Marie barely remembered walking back to her house that night. Her mind was numb, her body moving on autopilot. The truth sat heavy in her chest, suffocating. She had spent 3.5 decades married to a man who had never truly been hers. The betrayal cut deep, but she refused to let herself break. Not yet. She needed to know the full extent of his lies. That night, as Richard slept beside her, she took his phone. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through his messages, and with every new text, her worst fears were confirmed. "Linda, tomorrow night. Same time. Richard, I can't wait. I need to hold you. Linda, we have to be careful." She's starting to suspect something. Marie's breath hitched. They knew. They had been laughing behind her back, deceiving her while she remained blissfully ignorant. Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them away. She would not let them break her. The next morning, as Richard left for work, she made a decision. She wouldn't confront him first. She would go straight to the woman who had stolen her husband and 35 years of her life. Marie marched to Linda's door, her heart pounding, fists clenched. When Linda answered, surprise flickered across her face, but only for a second. She knew why Marie was there. "I know," Marie said, her voice steady. Linda sighed. Then, with a sad smile, she stepped aside. "Come in." Marie hesitated, then crossed the threshold. And in that moment, she knew her life would never be the same again. Marie stepped into Linda's house, her heart hammering in her chest. It felt foreign, wrong, like stepping into enemy territory. Though she had been in this house before, for neighborhood gatherings and the occasional cup of coffee, it had never felt like this. This was the place where Richard had loved another woman, where he had whispered the same sweet nothings he used to tell Marie, where he had built an entire secret life. Linda gestured toward the living room. "Would you like to sit?" Marie ignored the invitation. "I don't need hospitality. I need answers." Linda exhaled, rubbing her hands together as if trying to warm herself. She didn't look smug or guilty. She looked tired. "How long?" Marie's voice was ice. Linda hesitated, then met Marie's gaze. "Since before you married him." Marie felt like she had been slapped. She had braced herself for months, maybe a few years. But this? "You're lying." "I wish I were." Marie clenched her fists. "Then explain it to me. Explain how you've been sleeping with my husband for 35 years. Linda sat down on the couch, staring at the floor. "Richard and I were together before you. We were high school sweethearts." She let out a bitter laugh. "We had plans. Dreams. But things didn't work out the way we wanted. My family didn't approve of him. They pushed me toward someone else." Marie's mind raced. Richard had never mentioned any of this. "I married my late husband, and Richard married you. But he and we never stopped loving each other." Marie's stomach turned. "So you decided to betray 2 marriages? 2 families." Linda sighed. "I fought it at first. But Richard, he always came back. He told me he couldn't live without me, that he loved you, but not the way he loved me." The words were acid in Marie's ears. "He stayed with you for the kids, for appearances, but his heart." Marie cut her off with a sharp glare. Don't you dare talk to me about my husband's heart. Linda swallowed hard. I know you hate me. I don't blame you. But I never wanted to hurt you. Marie let out a cold laugh. You didn't want to hurt me? You spent 35 years sneaking behind my back with my husband. You sat in my home, smiled at my children, waved at me from across the lawn, all while sleeping with a man I thought was mine. And you're telling me you didn't want to hurt me. Linda looked away. Marie shook her head. I wasted my life on a man who was never mine. And you let me. Silence stretched between them. Then Linda spoke, her voice barely a whisper. He was never going to leave you. Marie's eyes snapped to hers. Linda gave a sad smile. I begged him to once, a long time ago, but he refused. He said it would destroy you, that he owed you loyalty, even if his heart was elsewhere. Marie's hands trembled, not from grief, but from rage. I don't care why he stayed. He made me live a lie. And with that, she turned and walked out the door. She had all the answers she needed. Now, it was time for Richard to face the truth. That night, Marie sat at the kitchen table waiting. The letter lay in front of her. Richard's phone, unlocked, displayed his messages with Linda. The proof of his betrayal was undeniable. When the front door opened, she didn't flinch. Richard walked in, setting down his keys. He glanced at her, then at the table. The moment he saw what was laid out before him, he froze. Silence stretched between them. Then Marie spoke. How long were you going to lie to me? Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. His face paled. Marie pushed the letter toward him. She told me everything. A flicker of something crossed his face. Regret? Guilt? Fear? I can explain. Marie laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. Oh, I'd love to hear it. Please, tell me how you accidentally had a 35-year affair with the woman next door. Richard ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Then how was it supposed to be? He hesitated. I loved her first. The words cut deeper than she expected. Richard took a step forward. It doesn't mean I didn't love you. I did. I do. Marie shook her head. No, you love the idea of me, the safety of me. But you never chose me, did you? Richard's silence was answer enough. Tears burned in Marie's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You stole my life, my choices. If I had known, I would have left. I would have built something real. Marie, please. No, her voice was steady. You don't get to beg now. Richard's face crumpled. He knew there was no fixing this. Marie stood, smoothing her hands over the fabric of her sweater. You should pack a bag. Richard's shoulders slumped. Marie, don't do this. We've built a life together. She met his gaze, cold and unwavering. No, I built a life. You just pretended to be in it. And with that, she turned and walked away. By morning, Richard was gone. Marie stood by the window, watching the sun rise. The house was quiet, too quiet. For the first time in 35 years, Richard wasn't here. His absence should have felt like a loss, but all she felt was a strange sense of peace. She had spent her entire adult life loving a man who had never truly been hers. Now, for the first time in decades, she was free. Free to heal. Free to rediscover herself. Free from the weight of a love that had never been real. And as the morning light poured into her home, Marie made a silent vow. She would never let anyone steal her life from her again.